Yesterday was supposed to be my day. After 6 grueling years of balancing full-time work and night classes, I had finally earned my degree in mechanical engineering. At 28, I was older than most graduates, but that didn't diminish my pride. If anything, it amplified it. Every all-nighter, every missed social event, every penny saved for tuition, it all led to this moment. My family had planned a celebratory lunch after the ceremony at my favorite restaurant, a small Italian place that made pasta that reminded me of my late grandmother's recipe. Mom had reserved their private room in the back, and I was touched by how much effort she'd put into making the day special. The graduation ceremony itself was a blur. I remember the weight of the cap on my head, the scratch of the gown against my neck, and the solid feel of the diploma in my hand. But most of all, I remember the beaming faces of my family as I walked across the stage. Mom, Dad, my younger sister Ellie, and my older brother Jake, all cheering as if I'd won Olympic gold. That feeling carried me all the way to the restaurant. For once in my life, I felt like the center of attention in our family, and it was nice. Growing up as the middle child, I'd often felt overlooked. Jake was the firstborn, the golden boy who'd followed Dad into the family accounting business. Ellie was the baby, 7 years younger than me, and perpetually in need of someone's attention. I was just there, reliable, invisible. But not today. Today was my day, or so I thought. We had just ordered our drinks when Ellie clinked her water glass with a spoon. She stood up, her face flushed with excitement, one hand clutching the arm of her boyfriend, Tyler. "Since we're all together, Tyler and I have some news," she announced, her voice rising with barely contained glee. "We're having a baby." The table erupted. Mom gasped, then burst into tears. Dad jumped up to hug Tyler. Jake started asking about due dates and whether they knew the gender yet. Champagne was ordered, for everyone except Ellie, of course. And just like that, my graduation lunch became Ellie's pregnancy announcement party. I sat there, my celebratory Prosecco untouched, watching as my parents fawned over my 21-year-old sister who had dropped out of college twice and was now pregnant by her boyfriend of 8 months. The boyfriend who, as far as I knew, was still finding himself between part-time barista gigs. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. I would eventually be happy for her. But in that moment, I felt a familiar sting. The spotlight that had briefly shone on me was abruptly redirected, and I was back in the shadows. 6 years of sacrifice and hard work, reduced to an afterthought in the wake of an unplanned pregnancy announcement. I excused myself to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. I don't know how long I stayed in that bathroom stall, but eventually there was a gentle knock on the door. "Honey, are you okay in there?" It was Mom. I wiped my eyes quickly and opened the door, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just needed a moment." Must be the excitement. Mom's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd always been able to see through my facades, a talent that was both comforting and infuriating. "You know," she said, leaning against the sink counter, "when you were born, Jake was so jealous he refused to look at you for 3 days." I blinked in surprise. This was not what I'd expected her to say. He was 4 and had been the center of our universe. Suddenly there was this loud, red-faced creature stealing all the attention. She smiled at the memory. "And then when Ellie came along, you were the same way. You told me you wanted to return her to the hospital because she was too noisy." "I don't remember that," I mumbled, though I felt a twinge of guilt about my current feelings. That's how family works sometimes. The spotlight shifts, not because we love one person more than another, but because life has its moments. She reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture she hadn't done since I was a teenager. "Today is still your day? Nothing changes that." But everything already had changed. We returned to the table where Ellie was showing ultrasound pictures on her phone. My graduation gifts sat unopened at the edge of the table, forgotten in the excitement of impending grandparenthood. I picked at my pasta as everyone discussed baby names and nursery themes. Dad was already offering financial advice for the new parents-to-be, while Jake and his wife were sharing stories about their own pregnancy journey. The cake that Mom had special ordered with my university logo and "Congratulations, graduate" written in icing sat untouched. "You should eat something more," my brother's wife whispered to me. "You've barely touched your food." I nodded and took another bite, though I couldn't taste anything. The disappointment had formed a lump in my throat that made swallowing difficult. When the bill came, Dad insisted on paying despite my protests. "It's your celebration," he said, but his eyes drifted to Ellie as he spoke. Outside the restaurant, Tyler suggested we all go back to their apartment to continue the celebration. "We've got the ultrasound video on our TV," he said excitedly. "Much better than on the phone screen." Everyone seemed enthusiastic about the idea, and I found myself being shepherded into my car to follow them. As I sat there, key in the ignition, Watching my family pile into their respective vehicles, a wave of selfishness washed over me. Why couldn't I just be happy for my sister? Why did I have to make everything about me? But another voice, quieter but persistent, reminded me. It actually was supposed to be about you today. I started the car and followed them anyway. The sun was setting as we drove through town, casting long shadows across the road. I turned up the radio, trying to drown out my thoughts, but they persisted. By the time we reached Ellie and Tyler's apartment complex, I had made a decision. I would stay for exactly 1 hour, make the appropriate noises of excitement over the ultrasound, and then claim exhaustion from the day's events. I would go home, pour myself a glass of wine, and celebrate my achievement alone. It wasn't the graduation day I had envisioned, but at least I could salvage the evening. Or so I thought, until we actually got inside the apartment. The door to Ellie and Tyler's apartment swung open, and I prepared my face for another round of pretending to be okay with how the day had unfolded. But as I stepped inside behind everyone else, I froze. The small living room had been transformed. A banner stretched across the far wall that read, "Congratulations on your engineering degree." Balloons in my university colors bobbed against the ceiling. On the coffee table sat my favorite dessert, not cake, but tiramisu from that little bakery across town that I'd mentioned loving once, maybe 2 years ago. And scattered around the room were framed photos. Me in my first college class, me studying late at the kitchen table, me at various stages of my 6-year journey. Some I recognized as ones my mom had taken, others must have been snapped without my knowledge. Most surprising of all was the small crowd of people beyond my family. My best friend from high school who had moved 3 states away, my favorite professor from my thermodynamics class, and even my old boss who had been flexible with my work schedule so I could attend classes. Surprise, they all shouted, and I stood there, utterly dumbfounded. Ellie rushed forward, grabbing my hands. "Did we get you?" "We totally got you." "What, how?" "I don't understand," I stammered. Mom stepped forward then, her eyes twinkling. "Did you really think we'd let your graduation day go by without something special?" Ellie's announcement at lunch was part of the plan. "Wait," I said, looking between them. "The pregnancy announcement was fake?" Ellie laughed. "Oh no, that's real. Baby Nugget is definitely on the way." She patted her still flat stomach. But the timing was strategic. Mom thought it would make the surprise party even more surprising if you thought we'd all forgotten about your big day. I turned to my mother, speechless. She'd known exactly how I would feel, had predicted my reaction down to the last detail, and had orchestrated this elaborate ruse, all to make my achievement feel even more celebrated in the end. "We've watched you work so hard for this," Mom said softly, taking the long route, never giving up even when it seemed impossible. "Did you really think we wouldn't recognize that?" Dad came up behind her, nodding. "We're as proud of you as we've ever been of anything in our lives." When Mom suggested this surprise party months ago, I immediately thought about how to make it even more of a shock, Ellie added. The pregnancy announcement was real timing-wise. We were going to tell everyone next week anyway, so we just moved it up a bit. "You're not mad, are you?" Mom asked, a hint of worry creeping into her expression. I looked around the room at all these people who had gathered to celebrate me. At my sister who had agreed to share her own momentous news in a way that would ultimately enhance my celebration rather than diminish it. At my mother who had orchestrated all of it, who had seen me, really seen me, not just today in that restaurant bathroom, but throughout my entire life. "Mad," I whispered, tears welling up again, but different tears this time. I can't even find the words. Mom pulled me into a hug then, and whispered in my ear, "Middle children are special. They don't always get the spotlight, but they're the heart of the family. Today, the spotlight is all yours." The next few hours were a blur of genuine celebration. My professor gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. My old boss presented me with a lead on a job at an engineering firm where his brother worked. My high school friend had brought mementos from our teenage years that sparked stories I'd long forgotten. And through it all, my mother watched me with such pride that I finally understood something important. I had never been invisible to her. Not once. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself sitting on the couch beside Mom, both of us watching as Ellie showed her ultrasound to the last remaining visitors. "How did you know exactly what I needed today?" I asked. She smiled and took my hand. "Because I know you. I always have." It turns out graduation day wasn't ruined after all. It was perfect in a way I never could have planned myself. A day that showed me not just what I had accomplished, but how deeply I was loved. And that's something I'll never forget.